Leadership series. Can everybody see that? Give me a thumbs up. Thanks, Nicole. Good to see you.
Got it.
All
We got
right.
it.
Okay, we're going to fast forward a little bit. And we talked about a little bit about the community approach. Here's a nice slide that shows all of some of the, excuse me, some of the organizations which we deal with. And I'm sure that you're familiar with that. One of my favorites is the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. And you also see Catholic Charities and then Red Cross, of course. I also have a ham radio network group that I connect with as well. And so some of these are VOADs at the state and national level, and some of these organizations like the Red Cross are excuse me are VOADs, and then the COADs are the smaller churches and organizations. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Great. Thank you. We're going to move along here. So, like I was saying, 85% of disaster response organizations report improved outcomes. And the reason for that is because prior to any disaster, there is a lot of collaboration going on, a lot of coordination, and there's good team building. So, the question I asked was, in your experience, what is the biggest benefit of collaboration during a disaster response? A faster and more coordinated delivery service. B, better use of limited resources. Or C, stronger connection with the community needs. Just go ahead and type in A, B, or C. Or you can say all of the above. There's no wrong answer. All of the above. Thanks, Alan. I appreciate it. Nicole also says all of the above. You guys are absolutely correct. All of the above. Okay. Moving along here. Now let's look at Salvation Army's distinctive capabilities within network. We operate scalable feeding operations using mobile canteens. We provide emergency services, shelter support, emotional and spiritual care officers, and of course, long-term recovery casework to help families rebuild. To get us interacting a bit, I'd like to invite us to use the chat as well. Uh, let's think about disaster response. What is the one disaster response you believe that would benefit your community? Go ahead and type that in. And it doesn't have to be a tangible. And when I say tangible, you don't have to see it, but you can also, it could be something that you feel. Would hope be a response to a disaster? Give me a thumbs up or tell me how you feel. If somebody gives you hope during a disaster, would that make you feel a little bit better? Absolutely. Food would make you feel better. Shelter would definitely make you feel better, right? What about compassion? Compassion is definitely something that we overlook. We think that we go into a disaster and providing food, water is all the disaster victims need, but in fact, they need more than that as well. They need compassion. They need support. They need somebody to talk to. So, Salvation Army and other partners, we provide that as well. Now, let's talk about Salvation Army and how we integrate with local emergency management operations. First, our canteens and feeding teams operate through agreements, also known as MOAs, with county offices of emergency services. These include safety standards like ServSafe, compliance and coordinated distributed sites. And second, volunteers are essential. They complete background checks, take ICS courses, and receive training for sheltering and feeding operations. Many volunteers, such as yourselves, are college students. Third, our deployment protocols flow from county emergency managers to Salvation Army leadership. And I want to emphasize that again. Our deployment protocols flow from county emergency management agencies. And what that means is we don't self-deploy. We don't go out to an emergency disaster without getting called forward by a government entity. That's very important. Mission prioritize life, safety, mass care, and supporting vulnerable populations. Before we move to our practical exercise, thumbs up if you are a college student and you've ever served in a shelter or a community emergency. Like to know if you've ever served in a shelter or some type of community emergency. It could be a warming center. It could be serving emergency food. All right. I know Tanya has. Great. Okay. So we're going to shift to the practical exercises. Community mapping challenge. This is designed to help think like a disaster responder and understand how faith-based organizations fit into the whole community structure. There's no wrong or right answer. All right, friends, I would like for you to think about your hometown or your campus or the city that you live in today. In the chat, 3 community resources that would matter during a disaster. Again, the question is, what are 3 community resources that would matter in your community during a disaster? An example would be, let's say, a fire station. I'll give you about 30 seconds to think about what would really matter in your community during a disaster. If you are in a flood zone, what do you think would be important? Something to think about. If you are in a fire zone, what do you think would be important? What would matter? Okay, so there's no right or wrong answer. It's just to give you a little bit of something to think about. One major gap in your community has something that would limit its ability to respond. Is there something that would limit your ability to respond to a disaster? That's how you should think about it. So an example would be, let's say you are in a fire zone and you don't have enough fire stations or fire suppression teams in the area. That would limit your ability to fight that natural disaster. So something to think about. Where do you see faith-based organizations fitting in your community? Another question. Do you see faith-based organization just doing the typical Sunday services? Or during a disaster and after a disaster, do you see your faith-based organization helping in feeding and sheltering? Love to hear your response on the chat. Great. So faith-based organizations and nonprofit agencies do have a big role when it comes to disaster. And that's why government entities consistently and continually keep in contact with faith-based organizations. We train hand in hand because there's not enough government entities to deal and manage a disaster. Any questions so far? Feel free to ask the questions. How are we doing there, Tanya? Good?
We are good. Can you see that chat? Dennis, want me to read you some of these
Yeah,
comments?
could you? Thank
Yeah,
you.
sure. So people need to, they are saying that we assist the most vulnerable, for example, nursing home residents, provide shelter, food, daycare to families, take care of the human side of things while the other services work to manage the emergency, helping with feeding and shelter, and then offering hope, prayer, community, and presence are some of the keys here.
Great. Love those answers. Let me ask you this. Anybody live in a very heavy populated city like New York or Miami? Raise a show of hands. Let's see. Okay, let me ask you this. Would Uber and Lyft be an asset during a disaster? And if so, how? Would Uber and Lyft be an asset to a disaster? What do you think? I would say yes.
Yes, you got a couple yeses here, kind of like the boats during 9/11, real-time mapping information. 10 Day says not with the way they drive, they might make it worse.
Well,
Transportation to shelters, Logan said. And yes, in fact, Florida used Uber and Lyft in our last major flood here really successfully. So would add that.
well, I kind of empathize with your comment about some Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, they don't drive good. So I don't give them a big a good rating, but I still give them a good tip because we got to show our love to them. So it's one of those things where you just give them a good tip, give them some good advice, and hopefully next time they pick you up, they don't scare you. Okay. All right, moving along here. Okay, so I see a lot of you had mentioned food banks and then also churches as well, and then fire stations. I'll also see that there's some gaps as well. So that's pretty good. I'm glad we're having some good conversation here. Just know that uh, because it's not listed or you have not thought about it, doesn't mean that it's been thought of or if it's been suggested. Just like Uber and Lyft, I would have never thought about using Uber and Lyft in an emergency disaster. So what I'm doing nowadays is inviting Uber and Lyft to my meetings, my readiness meetings, so that they can get involved as well. So that's something that I'm trying to do, and hopefully we'll gain more momentum on that. Ethical leadership and cultural humility is something very important. I want to close the content portion of our briefing by addressing ethical leadership and cultural humility. As responders, we must make decisions fairly, transparently, and under stress. I can't emphasize this enough because sometimes in a bad situation and disasters, it gets the best of us, and we just have to learn how to be calm and always remember that when we're dealing with volunteers, we got to treat them fairly, and we also have to treat them with respect as well because if we don't do that, we end up not having volunteers, and that challenge to deal with the disaster becomes much more heavy. We must protect donated resources, safeguard personal information, and maintain survivor dignity. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. When you deal with a disaster victim, they're going through a lot of pain and anguish, and sometimes they just need to be left alone. But again, you also have to understand that what they're going through is something totally different. So give them that space, but also give them that opportunity to put their head on your shoulder, so to speak, if they need you. Cultural humility is also essential. Especially in California, we serve people of many backgrounds, talk different languages, have different cultures, different religion, beliefs, and social economic values. Uh, when Salvation Army provides services, we are uh, non-prejudice. We help everybody the best way we can, and we have a very holistic approach in the way we do things. So something to remember. To check in with you, please put a big heart in the chat box if you've ever witnessed a community group come together in your community during crisis. Give me a big heart so I know that you're listening. Okay.
And Dennis, while people are putting their hearts in here, which they are, 10 Day has a question touching back on resources. Is it common for churches in the US to have community food banks, especially during emergencies?
That's a good question. Not every church will have a food bank, not but it's good to have with Salvation Army, we do have a food bank program. Uh and we have it on certain days, and it serves the immediate community, but we never turn anybody away. So if you belong to a church and it's just starting out, that's something that you guys could look into, a program where you can start. And that's part of being resilient. If a church opens up a food bank and starts to connect with the community, there's a couple things that you can come out of that. One, you're serving the community, you're connecting with the community, and you're also bringing your parishioners or your community together to serve that. So there's a lot of things that could be learned from just opening up a food bank. And there's a lot of programs uh, that will help you start that food bank. And what I would suggest is, talk to your local agencies, particularly the county social services, and find out if there's any grant funding for that as well. Hope I was able to answer your questions. Any other questions? Great. Well, moving along here. Now, I'd like to welcome our special guest speaker. He's a good friend of mine. He's also a mentor. Patrick Kendrick Neal. Just to highlight some of his accomplishments, he spent several years in the United States Marine Corps, as you can see on his bio here. He trained and equipped thousands of volunteers to prepare them for every type of disasters. He's been around the country. He's built a lot of BOADs and COADs and has networked. He also runs a large-scale emergency operations for his organizations. And currently, he is the director for the California Southern Baptist Convention. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Kendrick Neal. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well. Good afternoon to everyone.
Let's all give Patrick, excuse me, Pastor Kendrick Neal's a big heart and welcome him to the show here. Thank you, sir. Well, I got a couple questions for you, and I'm going to open up with my first question. And for our viewers out here, feel free to type in or raise your hand to ask uh, Pastor Kendrick any type of question you want, providing that it's a mercy disaster, and he'll be glad to answer that. So my first question: California is incredibly diverse. How do you and your teams practice cultural humility when serving communities?
There's very specifics for communities, but I'm going to just tell you in general, and this is something that I was told. I was going into a country in the Middle East, and we were going to live there. We spent 3 days in cultural studies, learning the culture. And the very last guy, the very last class, very last day, he said, "Hey guys, here's the truth. You know when somebody is disrespecting you. Don't disrespect the people." And I thought, I just wasted 3 days, right? It is very true. We know when somebody's patronized us. We know when somebody's being mean to us. We know when somebody's disrespecting us. And so we just say, man, you just love the people and you respect the people. The When you go into a culture, they know that when I went into the Middle East that I was not Middle Eastern. It wasn't a secret. It's pretty obvious, but that doesn't mean I can't love the people. That doesn't mean I can't respect the people. Now, when we're doing feeding operations, there are sometimes that there are feeding concerns, and you try to know those, you try to learn those. Don't make assumptions. Ask. So we ask the people. Um, uh, I will tell you, my one of the other things we talk about is when we go into the cultural situation, don't think you're better than everybody else, and don't think you're going to be the savior, because people know that. And we were going into Nepal after the earthquake, and there was a community that they couldn't get helicopters to, and so we knew they were short on water. We knew they were short on food, and so a group of us, we hiked in hundreds of pounds of water to this group, and we knew we were going to save the day. And as soon as we got there, they looked at us like we were idiots. They pull their water out of the creek and they boil it. That's how they've been doing it their whole lives. Like they didn't need the water that we had, and we just looked foolish. We just looked like complete idiots. Um, and so that the having a relationship, having community, and if you don't have any of that, just start off by loving and respecting the people you're there to serve, and it will go a long way.
Wow, that was a lot of water you probably hauled up, huh?
It was a lot of water, and then we were in a cultural thing. Like, do we leave it here and possibly insult them, or do we take it all out? We
Sure.
just tried to drink as much as we could because it was heavy. Water's about 7 pounds per gallon, and so it was a heavy. That's it was a good workout.
Well, good. Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm
Yeah.
sure that everybody has some questions there. Tanya, would you be so kind to read some questions? Or anybody have a question for the pastor?
Sure. There are none in the chat right now, but
Okay.
since you can't see the chat, maybe if we're done with the slides, we could stop sharing so you could see the chat. Or another option is people could unmute and ask their questions.
Yeah, let's do that. If anybody wants to unmute, please, by all means.
Okay. While they're thinking about questions, can I just touch on two of the things that came up in your presentation, Dennis?
Yeah.
One of the things that you talked about a lot, or you talked about the coad and the voad and how important that is with relationships. And then there was a question about food banks. As you can imagine, there's a lot of issues with food, and as far as food security, as far as healthy food, um, it is not uncommon to go to a church and ask for food, and there's some pantry in the back of the church. That stuff may have been expired for 7 years, or it may it's not suitable for human consumption. And so what we've been really seeing recently is, especially in the coads, organizations and churches coming together and supporting, like saying, hey, this church or hey, this food bank, and all of these local churches are going to support that one, and they maintain the health of that food. They make sure that the food is safe. When food is donated, there's somebody that's checking it, and there's somebody that's storing it, and there's somebody that's going through the administrative process to make sure that that food is ready to be distributed. It was not uncommon. I believe it is still not common that when people donate food, oftentimes it's food that they're trying to get rid of, or maybe it's close to the expiration date. So working together with organizations to have those food banks in the community. And if somebody comes to that church, there's a point of contact, there's a relationship, there's a direct relation to where they can get food that we know is going to be um, good food. It's going to be quality food. And so that comes through the VOAD relationships, and that comes through the community participating in those coads and working together for their community in times of disaster. And so I wanted to hit on that. The other thing I want to talk about was the church response and how churches can respond in disaster. I could think of a million examples. I could tell you the last 3 times that I deployed to Florida. One of the benefits of the local church is they actually provide housing for the response teams. And so that way, the people that are coming to help don't drain the resources of that community, and more resources can be dedicated to the residents that were impacted by the disaster. If you guys remember Lahaina, that was a huge problem. Um, there's a lot of hotels in Lahaina, and there's a lot of spots for residents to go, but all the relief workers came and took up actual beds that residents could have used, and so it became a real issue. But churches, um, probably not suitable for a family. I'm not sure I'd bring my family of 5 to live in the basement of a church. But disaster relief workers, they can sleep on a cot, they can sleep in community, and save the hotels and the Airbnbs for actually people that were affected by the disaster. We have teams right now deployed in 2 locations in California and up north. They were impacted by winter storms and such heavy, wet snow. It looks like a hurricane went through a couple of these communities. And there's a local church, and we have teams staying in the basement of a church, and that's where they sleep. We brought in a shower trailer for our team, and they're going to be working up there out of that church that helps save resources in that community for those that were impacted by disaster. And that's a huge response. When we talk about Lahaina, we talk about LA fires, and we have thousands of response workers coming in. Churches can help mitigate the burden on the local community, help lessen it. All right.
Thanks, Pastor. Now, do we have any more questions or another question? I'll ask a question if we don't have any.
I have two whenever there's a moment
Oh,
for me.
go ahead, Nicole.
Okay, Nicole Byer here. So I am an Embry-Riddle grad. I used to work at Embry-Riddle, and now I'm with Silent Falcon. So I do have a question about drones and emergency disaster response. But before that, I want to talk about pets. Because during the California fires, I'm from California. My family was in it, all of that. But they weren't in the fire, but they were near it. A lot of people lost pets. So in these types of situations, how does that go? I mean, for some families, their pets, that's their fur baby. Um, I can't imagine losing my dog. And I'm just wondering, like, what's the standard, for emergency response relief with animals?
So I'll tell you about for our organization. So we are not first responders, and so when we go in to start doing relief work, um, the sites are deemed safe, and
Okay.
and human remains are are for the most part not there. I can tell you that, especially in the LA fires, we were there for about 4 months. We did about 600 homes that we worked with residents. It was not uncommon to find pet remains. And what we do, we treat that to the homeowner. We bring them straight to the homeowner. Uh, we have had, um, I'm going to say, a funeral service. We have had a time with that family owner where we let them mourn that animal. We will stop work. Oftentimes, if they find one bones, they want to find more remains of their pet, and we will stop work and support that effort for that homeowner. But that is something we take serious for homeowners because, as you said, they're the fur babies, and so we treat that with importance. Um, and like I said, probably after Hurricane Ian in Hawaii or in Florida, where you guys are, that's probably where we found the most. Um, we found pets everywhere. I think it just came so fast, and pets got stranded with that hurricane. And so it's something we take serious, and we allow for the grieving. We don't just bypass it. And I know organizations are different on that. In LA, we actually had I just forgot the name, the police side of animal services that were often with us and helping us because missing animals were reported to them. And so when we were in areas where there were missing animals, we worked a lot with them to try to help restore that with the pet owner.
Gotcha. So there's a process, but there's no organization like fully dedicated to that
Um,
effort.
I, I'll tell you, in LA, there was an organization through the VOAD that their specialty was looking for pet remains. We never worked with them, and I think there was 50-50 of how successful they were. It was the first time I'd heard of that organization. Um, but they were using cadaver dogs, and especially in LA, by the time we went in there, most of the first responders, the police, had ran through that area with cadaver dogs already. And so I don't know the science behind a human and pet cadaver, but this organization had dogs that would help with that. Um, I heard good and bad things from the results of
Good.
that organization.
Okay, thank you. Because I did come across some websites where a bunch of animals were found, but they didn't know who the dogs and cats belonged to. So we almost adopted one of those animals, and I was just wondering, like, how is this? What kind of process? What kind of organization? Who leads this effort? But you just answered my question. Thank you. And then in regards to drones, I know there's emergency disaster response and whatnot. Whether or not you'll work with drones directly, do you feel they're effective, or what are the pros and cons with having drones operate in this type of situation if needed?
Yeah, so I will tell you, we do use drones. One of the things we've ran into is some of the new licensing and permitting requirements for
Are
using
you talking
them.
about the NDAA compliant drones?
Um, I'm not familiar with those.
Okay, then it's probably something else, but will you please
And
continue?
we find them extremely helpful. So we have to, before we go onto a site, especially when we're doing cleanup, we have to do an assessment of that site to see what we need, what the damage is, what type of equipment, how many people. And we have used drones. For fire, it's a little bit different than for when we do flooding or storm damage. And so we have used them in the past. We haven't used them in the last year or so. And we are working on getting some licenses to fly them in certain areas. But
Oh, awesome.
we could do we could do assessments much quicker, much more effective, and with less people. Um, but that being said, the other part of our assessments, one of the things is the healing of the homeowner, and so we want to connect with the homeowner and be a face to face with the homeowner. So we use assessments as a tool, but not to replace the human element of connecting with the homeowner.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Nicole, great questions. I just want to piggyback on that drone. You have a hidden talent there, and I wish I met you probably a year and a half ago when I was up at Lake Isabella in Central California. We had a couple of livestocks that needed to be located, and we had the ASPCA up there, and Animal and Humane up there helping out, and they were looking for animals, but had that drone technology been available, that could have been an added asset. So uh, definitely would encourage you to just find your closest animal shelter, animal volunteer rescue, and just be part of that, and then stand up that capability. Because a lot of these nonprofits, just like anything else, were challenged with funding. Uh, when I first started doing disaster work, I was strictly a volunteer. I came out of the United States Army. I was retired. Hurricane Michael in Georgia, Florida had happened, and rather than just watch the news and feel sorry for the people, myself and a whole bunch of veterans, we loaded our pickup trucks with chainsaws because we lived in Fort Benning, Georgia, and we just drove down a Florida Georgia line and just cutting trees down and opening up back roads so that trucks could go by. And then, from there, I was addicted to just helping people, and started chasing disasters. So that's how I started my career with Mercy Disasters. So I encourage you to do this. If you have that passion with the drones and with animals, I think that could be something that you could lead.
Okay. Well, thank you. You're about to make me cry, but
What?
thanks. Just
No,
hearing
I
your
don't want to make you
passion.
cry.
I mean, just hearing your passion, for serving and all that. It's meaningful, it's special. And thank you for your service. I'm a veteran as well, but I know I was in the Air Force, not as hard as Army and Marines. But yeah, thank you for your service. And I really appreciate, hearing others focus on rescue efforts for animals too. Because for some people, they don't have anyone else but their fur baby. And it is traumatizing to endure a situation like that and then to lose your only other companion.
Mhm. Now, if you have the bandwidth, getting involved with the BOADs and the COADs, and all you got to do is just find out what your COAD or your BOAD, your local BOAD is, and then just ask them to join their meeting. And uh, like I said, a lot of them are nonprofit, but if they have the need, and I'm sure they will definitely welcome a drone capability, especially if you have all the licenses and the instruments.
Okay, thank
Great.
you.
You're welcome. Any more questions? Now I'm able to see the chat because now I know how to work it.
So there was a question about the food bank. Would that not overwhelm that one organization if there was an emergency? I mean, actually, what happens is it's a food bank that's formed, and so when those organizations decide to support that, what they do is they give all their food there, and that organization has a staff whose primary job is to make that food bank run. And so they're set up for that, they're prepared for that, and that's why they exist. And it actually is helpful to have a designated organization do it instead of 10 other churches do it halfway. And so they say, hey, here's an organization that is set up just to do that. And it has turned out to be pretty efficient and effective. Um, wait,
Let
there,
me ask you, I got a
yeah, go ahead.
question. Since do we have any other questions on the chat, or anybody want to ask Pastor Kendrick another question?
Yeah, Tendy had a follow-up question about care for disaster response aids, food, water, and shelter
Okay.
without adding more strain to the already overwhelmed system. So again, there's so many different organizations and they all have their own way to do it. So as I answer this question, I'm just talking specifically from the Southern Baptist Disaster Relief. So when we respond, all of our teams are self-sufficient. So just like I was telling you, just yesterday, I drove up a shower unit to a church because the church didn't have a shower, but we were going to have teams there. So when we deploy a team, we deploy that work unit. So for example, the chainsaw team, we deploy the chainsaw team. I also deploy a feeding team to take care of the chainsaw team. And then we bring our own showers. If the church doesn't have a kitchen, we have several feeding kitchens that we can bring up a kitchen and feed that team. So everything we do is self-sufficient. We just brought up a trailer full of literally fuel for our vehicles and for our equipment. We brought up a track skid steer. We brought up a couple industrial chippers, chainsaws. So everything that we come with is self sufficient. We have about 2,100 churches in California that are part of the network. We have 400 in Nevada. And so we can go just about anywhere and work out of that church, that community, and not have to rely on that community for any of their resources. When we were in San Diego, we did the same thing. And so when there was the flooding in San Diego, some organizations come, and it's just the way they're set up that they need housing, they need somebody to supply their food. Sometimes they ask us if we'll cook their food along with ours. They need places to shower. But we want to be really intentional that when we come, we don't ask for anything from that community, but we want to make sure that we're contributing, not taking away from that response. So, and we partner with Salvation Army a lot. So we've just signed a MOU with the Salvation Army about sharing spaces, so they can come and stay in our spaces, we could stay in theirs, and all of that is to provide a better, more efficient, more effective response to those that are affected by that disaster. Hope that answers your question for us.
That's amazing. Thanks, Pastor. It does make sense. And you have a lot of capability out there. A lot of us take for granted. I'm one of those guys where I'll pass by a church and never think twice that that is a power projection platform for emergency disaster. And when I mean power projection, it provides food, it provides shelter, it provides logistics. So some of those things I've taken for granted. And I thank you and your organization for doing that. We'll take one more question for the pastor. If there's any questions left, I got one more question. Anybody else would like to throw a question at him? Got to give him something hard though, because he took 1 hour out of his day, and I promised him that we were going to have an engaging conversation.
Okay, I do have one. I have I can't help it if you're giving me an opportunity. So I have my own family emergency kit. And I'm going to name a few things that I think enough people don't talk about. And then please tell me what you think, are the top 3 necessities that are easy to plan for and have ready, but people don't always have. So I have a list of a few things here that I think, enough people just don't think about it. What should I add to my list? What should all of us add to our list? And if we're volunteering at a church or whatever, should we put together, these emergency kit bags, whatever, So besides the obvious with Band-Aids and peroxide and some other things, I have zip ties, lighters, and basic medicine that might be hard to get to during an emergency: Tylenol, ibuprofen, allergy pills. I think the zip ties is something that a lot of people don't think of, and lighters. What other item or items do you think, people should have ready in their homes in case something happens? Or if churches have emergency kits, what other items should we add in there?
Yeah, so for individuals, actually, this is funny, Nicole, since you asked. I was just at a safety fair, and the table next to me were providing list of must-have items for pet evacuations. And so it's like if you have a pet and you have to leave, make sure you have these things. Um, but for us, you don't need to have anything. You need to save your life. If you have time to grab stuff, you should have some of your personal identifying documents, right? A passport, driver's license. That all makes life so much easier on the back end. We can get all
Okay.
of that, and you can get all of that. So you need to have those documents. You also need to have, you said general medications. If there's specific medications that you need to be able to have those in a spot where you can grab them and go. It'll be easier to get aspirin than it would to get some specific medicine that you need, whether it's for your heart or for something else. So if you have specific medicines, have those available to you. One of the things that we did, and just for fun, I don't know if it's in the top 3 important things, but we noticed that when a lot of shelters and places where you get food, they give you canned food and you do not have a can opener. So we have put can openers in all of our crisis buckets, and we agreed with you. We put zip ties in there. We have flashlights in there. We have can opener in there. We have a warming blanket in there. I'm trying to remember. We put trash bags in there, Ziploc bags. Um, and so we've put some of those necessities in there. But about a couple years ago, we realized we were somewhere and people had all this food, and we were asking them, "How are they when you eating it?" And they said, "We don't have a way to open it." And so now We started putting can openers in it. Um, so those are some of the things you need to grab. A lot of your personal identifications. We put vehicle records. We put like in my house, we have a little white box that's about this big that has our marriage license in there, our passports in there, our social security cards in there, and everybody knows if something happens, if you grab nothing else, grab that box. We can make everything else work from
Okay. Yeah. And if you couldn't tell, I'm a prepper. So thank you. Um,
that.
someone put a deck of cards. I like that. A game, something to keep us busy in a healthy way. Okay. And that's a great,
Nicole,
these are great ideas to add. Because we just moved here a few months ago and we're starting to get more involved with our community and, learn which churches to go to and whatnot. I was just at the church on Tuesday volunteering. So these are nice things to add. And they're affordable. If you buy them during normal times, they're accessible, especially a lighter, right? You can use it to heat up water. You can do so many things with it.
so my input for surviving is, I give you an example. If you're a family of four, mom, dad, uh, and two kids, each person is going to have a rucksack to go. I call it a rucksack to go. And within that, basic things, survivability. One is survivability. You need a knife. Get your all-purpose Swiss Army knife that has the 27 things in it. That's
Okay.
one. So survivability, a compass, battery to work under obscure environment like night. Then that's one. Then the other piece is if I can't get food, I need to go hunt. So you need a bigger knife, so you can make some traps, some fishing line, some hooks. So in case you have to get out of the city because there's an infestation of, let's say, uh, Ebola, and you need to get out of that hot zone, you need to go to a creek or you need to go to a lake, you need to go catch some fish. So that's how you can make those uh, basket traps or use your fishing line. Those are the things and then the other piece, like Pastor Kedrick said, space blankets, all purpose, hot and cold. Then the other piece is, I call it the UAV panel, uh, something where you can signify or signal a helicopter or a plane in case that you decide, to go someplace where there's no rescue. You can put a panel out there, and people could identify who you are. So some of those things that I would make sure that you have, because the threat is all hazard. You don't know if it's going to be an earthquake. You don't know if it's going to be a fire, or sometimes half of the time you got to just shelter in place. Unless you're in California and the Palisade fires, you have to get out of there. But if the if the disaster is shelter in place because we have an attack or we have some kind of aerosol or we have some kind of uh, bio, then you have to shelter in place.
Okay. And then I'm wondering, do you think there's enough education out there for young children? I mean, everything you're telling me is so useful. And like this summer, we moved to Wisconsin, and it's several like we're all into that stuff. My husband is a retired A-10 pilot. He's going to drop us off at his family property. We're going to camo up, have the poncho, all that with a compass, and the kids are going to have to learn to navigate. And I'm not a navigatress like he is, so I'll be stuck in on 100+ acres as well. We're inviting our children's friends, my nieces and stuff, and I'm just wondering, do we have education like that in general for this field of study? Like, do we offer it to children? I feel like kids don't know enough about that, which is why in the summer we're having, boot camp with mom and dad and family and friends, and the kids are going to have to learn how to do all this. Like we've taught them to do archery, shoot, and all that, fishing. I wonder, is there enough education out there for children? Even when I was at the church with the kids on Tuesday, I always bring in some type of military aspect to the classroom, and the teachers allow me to as a volunteer sub. Do you think we have enough education out there for K to 12?
I'll leave it to Pastor Kendrick to answer that question.
And if not, should we start something like just free education or online events, or, every year pick a certain location where K to 12 can meet and go through your guys's training or my husband's previous close air support training, but, search and rescue survival.
I can't speak for everywhere. I will tell you in California, so about 6 months ago now, I don't remember the exact date, Central California did a kids disaster response day, and
Oh, wow.
at the fairgrounds, they closed it, and it was it was open to everybody, but for juniors and seniors of the Fresno Unified School District, it was part of their day. So they came for half a day, and it was actually really cool. They had the California Fire Department, Cal Fire, came in with helicopters and were showing kids how they do fires, and they had all the organizations were set up, and all of the things that they passed out were geared towards students. And so it was a massive thing in Fresno County School District. Like I said, made it mandatory field trip for their juniors and seniors in high school. Just a few months ago, I saw Dennis. We were at a California, um, what was it called? That OES, Officer of Emergency Service. It was a safety fair or something like that, and that was also geared towards families. And so there was a lot of children around there that was passing it out. We did another one in another county. It was on a Saturday. Again, a safety fair for children. And it was all day, 8 to 3. And if I said 20 people came by that whole time, that might be a high number. So
Wow.
I think there may be information, there may be issues on how to distribute that information, how to get out that information. But I can tell you that there are things that are geared towards maybe not 5-year-olds, but definitely teenagers, 13, 14, 15 through 18. There are a lot of resources out there for that.
Thank you. I didn't know, and Tanya sent some helpful links. And then I guess I'll look on social media and stuff, and maybe I just need to start digging more into this realm, this space on
If you get
LinkedIn and
connected
whatnot.
with your local VOAD and COAD, my guess is you'll find some of those areas. Um, I'll be honest with y'all. There's a lot of VOAD meetings I go to, and I walk out and say, "There's 2 hours of my life I'll never get back." But there's some really important relationships that are formed when you go to the lunch in between the sessions, and you hear about a lot of cool things going on in the community and a lot of what other organizations are doing. And so those are good spots to get connected with this.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Dennis, I know you've thought that too, and you left a VOAD. Don't laugh at me like that.
No, you're absolutely correct. And, we could go on and talk about this all day long. Pastor, thank you very much. And Nicole and friends, really engaging conversation. The more we talk about disaster readiness, the better prepared we are. Uh, I like to say, I think that getting the community or being part of the community is important to be ready for disaster. So I'm going to leave by saying, if you want to be ready for disaster and you want to be resilient, get involved.